What's going on YouTube? It's your girl Yoga by Biola here with a new YouTube video. Good to see you again, fam. Today I wanted to curve to the left a little bit, to the right as well maybe, and just change it up from our usual physical asana practices today. Just give us some time, talk one-on-one, you and me, and ultimately do a little yoga talk and break down the 5 energetic bodies and discuss how the practice of yoga, the practice of self-study, can begin to help us ultimately return back to our authentic nature in those 5 compartments. Now, the practice of yoga means to yoke or unite the mind and the body. Now, the invisible agent that is uniting or yoking these 2 things together is the breath. And the breath ultimately connects us to the invisible body. Now, what's really powerful about the practice of yoga is that it's a multidisciplinary, multi-pronged, multifaceted practice that ultimately cultivates a space for self-study. And the way the Western world represents or showcases the practice of yoga doesn't show the multifaceted or multi-pronged practice that it is. When we tend to think of yoga through the lens of the Western world, we might think of a traditional yoga studio or an instructor or these physical postures with people have their heads over their legs and doing crazy handstands and all of this acrobatic type of nature, very performance-based yoga practice. And I'm here to tell you that ain't what it's about, boo. The practice of yoga, like I said, is multi-pronged and it features body, breath, and being. If you break that down, that's asana, the physical yoga postures that we tend to do a lot of the times. That's pranayama, that's breath practices, that's meditation, that's a sit practice, and that's self-reflection or self-study by noticing what's taking place in these energetic bodies. Ultimately, all of these different practices together bring and build the practice of yoga. Now, what I tend to have some challenges with the Western world and how it showcases yoga is that it prioritizes the studio and the teacher as these gurus, these noblemen, and instead of really allowing the student to become aware that the guru is the self. The guru lives and sits in the being, and ultimately the practice of yoga is allowing us to return back to the self and tap into this source wisdom that we have housed in our bodies. If we continue to only look at the practice through the Western lens or the Western world's lens of how it's codified or shared, with the studio and the instructor being these overarching necessities, we miss the mark on the practice. And we miss the mark on making it inclusive and accessible to different communities and different groups of people. Now, when we get to the energetic bodies, there's 5 energetic bodies that are going on right up in here, but we don't necessarily always notice them because most of them are invisible. You have your very physical body. This is your visceral body that encompasses the blood, the muscles, and the bones that you can feel and touch. And your sensory body, your 5 senses are guided through the physical body, or they ultimately guide the physical body. Then you have the emotional body. That could also be called the trauma or the pain body that tends to live in the past or the future. You have your spiritual body, which is your connection to source. It's a vertical, kind of a vertical relationship here. You have your relational body that houses your attachment styles and how you connect horizontally with people around you. Then you have your mental body, which houses your conscious and your subconscious mind. Now, what's so phenomenal about the practice of yoga, and when we begin to look at it through its authentic nature as opposed to how the Western world packages it, is that the practice ultimately, the multidisciplinary practice of yoga, provides a space for us to begin to acknowledge all of those energetic bodies and begin to return to self in each of those energetic bodies so that we can ultimately come to our authentic nature. If we're only receiving the practice of yoga through the physical practice or body well-being, which is how it's most of the time packaged when we see it, then we're only reaping a bit of the physical benefits as opposed to all of the other benefits that speak to the other energetic bodies, as well as the different practices that ultimately allow us to return to self, to return to the guru that sits within. Now, this is extremely important to me because when I first began practicing yoga in 2008, it was very much a physical practice. I loved the visceral feel of challenging my physical body, but it quickly became something else. It quickly morphed into me becoming more aware of my emotional body, my trauma body, and a lot of these roots that had me stuck to different beliefs and agreements that weren't necessarily serving me. And from there, moving into my mental body, to moving into my spiritual body, to moving into my relational body, my outward expression of how I interact with people, and healing in each of those places in an effort to begin to return to myself, my authentic nature, in all of those compartments of my life. Now, these things didn't always take place in a traditional studio, nor did they also take place by me being guided by an instructor. They actually took place from me diving into the traditional practices of yoga, the traditional practices of meditation, sitting with my own thoughts, sitting with my own self, and beginning to discover the origins of some of those denser, low-frequency emotions that I was carrying. It was also through the practice of pranayama, through the breath practice, and really beginning to notice and acknowledge where my body was holding more sensation in my emotional and visible body, and how that was being translated in my physical body. It was through all of these different practices of yoga that I was able to begin to return to myself in these different energetic bodies. And with everything going on, it's super important that we continue to remove these things that appear to be necessities, which you could say is a traditional yoga studio or an instructor, in an effort to begin to explore who we are and what is inside of us. Now, I'm not saying that you don't need an instructor for your physical yoga practice or the other facets of a yoga practice. It's important to have a trained instructor to possibly guide you, but that trained instructor is not necessarily more noble than you. At the end of the day, they have guru in themselves, and you have guru or sage in yourself. And ultimately, the practice of yoga is there to help guide you back to that guru or back to the self, to explore your own authentic nature. With that being said, I want to share something with y'all. I've been working on really identifying what my place in this movement is as a Nigerian American woman, as a Black woman, and really beginning to acknowledge, how do I feel I can best serve my community? Not everybody's going to be on the front lines in the protests. Some of us are healers, some of us are educators, some of us are builders. And I've really been taking the time to acknowledge what my place and what my position is. And with that, I've really been working on a project called Iya, which means mother in Yoruba, which is a platform that ultimately removes the studio and removes the instructor to help you return to self. Now, before we move straight to launching the platform, I created a course called the Return to Self course. It's a 7-day course holding space for you to return to self in your physical body by breaking down the physical body through the 5 senses. This course is completely self-guided, although a trained practitioner, myself, is going to be helping you through the videos, the writing prompts, and the lectures. It includes pranayama, meditation, physical asana, in addition to self-guided study to help you return to self in your physical body and ultimately transform low frequency or dense energy that's taking place in your physical body. Now, there's a link down below in the description box that you can click that's going to take you to a landing page where you can go ahead and put your email address to learn a little bit more and read a little bit more about what this course is all about, and just really see if it resonates, if it's for you. And if it's not, I completely understand. If it does, I would love to have you join us, and there will be a link for you to go ahead and do so. I really want to continue to explore all of the 5 energetic bodies and also explore the multidisciplinary practice of yoga and the many various prongs that make this practice what it is, and ultimately cultivate a space for you to have a practice of self-study. If this video felt good for you, go ahead and give me a like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you right back here, either on the seat, the couch, or the mat real soon. Thanks for joining in, y'all.